Ever feel like the job market's a game and like maybe it's rigged, like someone somewhere changed the rules and not in your favor. Well, we're diving into a story that cuts right to the heart of that feeling. It's about Cognizant,
Cognizant, yeah.
the tech giant, and some serious accusations about how they hire, how they find the people they need.
Yeah, this isn't just like a tech industry story, though. This goes way beyond that. This touches on globalization,
Mm-hmm.
the future of work itself. Really gets at whether companies, big companies, are playing fair in what is becoming this massive global talent pool.
Okay, so for those of us who, I'll admit, I haven't memorized every single tech company on the Fortune 500, remind me what makes Cognizant stand out. What's their like main thing? What do they do?
Think of them as like the behind-the-scenes wizards.
Right.
So they're huge in outsourcing, meaning they're providing services to other companies, businesses, whoever it might be, handling things that, most people don't think about but are essential. IT, consulting, all that. They keep the gears turning.
Wizards, huh? But wizards who, and this is according to what we've been reading, have a workforce that's 75% South Asian.
At least.
Is that typical in the tech world?
I mean, it depends on the company, obviously, but that's a much higher concentration than you typically see, that's for sure.
Mm.
And that brings us to the controversy here, right?
Mm.
Because this reliance on a specific demographic is directly tied to the H-1B visa program.
Ah, H-1B visas. The golden ticket to working in the U.S., or so I've heard. I mean, break it down for me. What's the quick version? If I know nothing about these visas, what are they?
Okay, imagine you're a company and you need someone with, like, very specific skills,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you can't find enough qualified Americans, or so you say.
Okay.
The H-1B, it lets you hire someone from overseas, from another country, to fill that gap. And this usually happens in fields like, well, tech.
Makes sense. Got to keep those tech gears turning, as you said. And I sense a but coming here.
There's always a but, right?
Right.
The but is whether companies are being genuine about prioritizing American workers, like they're supposed to, or if they're just using this H-1B program to, say, bring in cheaper labor,
I see.
maybe even when it puts American workers at a disadvantage.
Hmm.
And that's a whole other can of worms.
And that's where Cognizant, our wizard friends, enter the legal battle royale, right?
Exactly. They're being accused of favoring South Asian workers, particularly from India, over others.
Okay.
And it's not just about, like, who they hire. It's about what types of visas they're using, which is even more complicated.
Okay, hold up. There are different types of work visas. This is where my brain starts to feel like it needs its own IT department.
Right. It gets very specific.
It does.
So think of it like this. You've got your H-1B, right? That's for specialized skills, like we talked about.
Yeah.
And it's got, some protections built in for American workers. Then you've got your L1. That's for transferring employees within a company, like if they're moving from one office to another, but in a different country.
Sure.
And then you've got your B1, and that's more for, like, temporary business visits.
Okay, so there's a whole system.
Oh, yeah.
So Cognizant is accused of what? Like playing Visa roulette, trying to find the cheapest option.
That's the allegation, yeah. They're saying Cognizant is deliberately using these less expensive visas, your L1s, your B1s, when they should, by law, be using the H-1B, which, like we said, has those stricter requirements, especially when it comes to how much they're paying those employees.
So it's like they're trying to order, like, I don't know, a gourmet meal, but at like fast food prices. Clever, maybe, but not exactly, the most ethical move.
Right, and the question becomes, how do you prove that?
Exactly.
What evidence is out there? And that's what makes this case so interesting, because it's not just coming from one place. You've got former Cognizant employees coming forward with these stories, right? Saying they were discriminated against, that they got passed over for jobs, for promotions, all because they favored, allegedly, the South Asian workers.
So these are people saying, hey, I was qualified, I was right there, and they chose someone else, and it was because of where they were from.
That's exactly it. And these individual stories, while they're just, a small piece of the puzzle, they're part of a bigger picture that's starting to emerge.
Okay.
And then you've got the legal side of things, which is a whole other ballgame. One of the sources you shared mentioned this False Claims Act. Right?
Oh, hold on. The False Claims Act. That sounds intense. I'm picturing like some Jason Bourne spy thriller stuff. What is that all about? Break it down for me.
So it's basically a law.
Mm.
And it says that if a company is, to put it bluntly, defrauding the government, like if they're misusing funds, breaking the rules to get something they shouldn't have, that an individual can actually sue on behalf of the government.
Oh, wow. So in this case, they're saying Cognizant is defrauding the U.S. government by misusing these visas.
That's the allegation, yeah. That by using these cheaper, less regulated visas, they're finding ways around the system.
Mm.
The rules that are meant to protect American workers.
Wow.
And that could mean they're profiting, but at the expense of the government and those workers.
It's kind of amazing how one company's hiring practices can spiral out into this whole legal and ethical debate?
Yeah, and this case is far from over. We don't know how the courts are going to rule, but if, and this is a big if, but IF Cognizant loses,
Yeah.
the consequences could be huge. Like, we're talking massive fines, maybe even being forced to, like, completely overhaul how they hire people.
Wow.
And it could even spark these wider changes to how the whole H-1B program's managed, on a national level.
Okay, so huge stakes then, potentially.
Definitely.
A lot of different ways this could go. But I think what I'm wrestling with here is this. On the one hand, you've got companies like Cognizant. They're saying, look, we need this global talent pool. It's essential for innovation, for growth, for, frankly, staying afloat in this competitive landscape.
And to be fair, there's some truth to that, right? Like the tech industry, it moves so fast, it's incredibly demanding.
Oh, yeah.
And to find someone with the exact skill set you need at the exact moment you need it, it's like finding a needle in a haystack sometimes.
Right, totally. It's like a unicorn, basically. But then there's that flip side. What about the American workers? How does this impact them?
Exactly, yeah. Because if any company, not just Cognizant, can just bring in cheaper labor from somewhere else, what does that do to wages here in the U.S.? What happens to job security?
Right.
And does it, and this is a big one for me, does it stifle the opportunity for American workers to even develop those skills, the ones that are in such high demand? If those jobs are going overseas anyway.
It's like this whole debate is a tug of war.
Tug of war between needing the best talent, wherever that may be, and protecting your own workforce.
Right. And it's tough because there are valid points on both sides.
Definitely. On the one hand, if companies can't access a global talent pool, it could slow down innovation.
Imagine the breakthroughs we might miss out on, right?
Exactly. And on a larger scale, it could even impact the U.S.'s position as a leader in the tech industry.
Sure.
A leader that everyone looks to.
Okay, so that's the argument for needing those global connections. But what about the concerns about American workers? What happens if companies bring in cheaper labor from overseas? Does that mean American tech workers are out of luck?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The fear is that it could lead to lower wages for everyone, or even American workers being passed over for jobs or promotions. And it's not just about the number of jobs, right? It's about the types of jobs. Are we creating a system where only certain high-level tech jobs are available to Americans while others are outsourced?
It's like we're back to that game of roulette, but this time it's our careers on the line.
It's a complex issue, and there are no easy solutions, right?
Yeah, I agree.
But what's fascinating is that this case against Cognizant is forcing us to confront these questions head on.
It's like they're the canary in the coal mine.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
And depending on how it plays out, it could have ripple effects throughout the entire tech industry. This case could influence how other companies approach their hiring practices, especially when it comes to visas.
So what happens now? What are the potential outcomes?
Well, if Cognizant loses, they could be hit with some pretty hefty fines.
Okay.
We're talking millions, even billions of dollars.
Wow.
They might be forced to change their hiring practices, maybe even create programs to support American workers.
Right, so it could have a direct impact on the people they're trying to hire.
Exactly. And on a larger scale, this could lead to stricter regulations around the H-1B visa program in general, which is a major shift.
So this is something to keep an eye on, even for folks who aren't knee-deep in the tech world.
Absolutely. Whether you're a recent grad hoping to break into tech, a seasoned professional, or just someone who uses technology every day, this case has implications for all of us.
This whole thing really makes you think, doesn't it? Is there a way for companies to have it both ways, to tap into that global talent pool without leaving American workers behind?
That's the challenge, isn't it? To find that balance. One thing that some experts suggest is focusing on creating more training and development opportunities for American workers, especially in those high-demand tech fields.
So instead of just bringing in talent from elsewhere, we invest in building it up here.
Exactly. And that could mean anything from expanding computer science programs in schools to providing more on-the-job training opportunities.
It sounds like this deep dive has uncovered more questions than answers.
That's often how it goes with the most important topics.
It's definitely given us a lot to think about. So, for our listeners who want to learn more about H-1B visas and the companies that use them, we'll link to the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services website in the show notes. It's a bit of a rabbit hole, but if you're curious about the ins and outs of work visas, that's the place to go.
And it's always a good idea to stay informed because as we've seen with Cognizant, these issues can have a real impact on our lives.
It's a reminder that the future of work is constantly evolving. What do you think, listener? How do we balance the need for global talent with